The red sun rises. Blood has been spilled this night.
Yeah, I also think of Well, in case you didn't know, I'm Brian.
And I'm Matthew.
And this is Road Trip Recap.
Spoilers up ahead, as today we're going to be talking about the Phantom Traveler episode of Supernatural.
We're also going to be looking at Supernatural's version of demons.
Buckle up and let's go. Our episode opens up at an airport as we see a nervous flyer getting ready for his flight to take off. As he's kind of freshening himself up in the bathroom, we get our first look at their first interpretation of a demon, which in this episode almost looks more like a swarm of insects. And I also noted that this demon liked to enter through the eyes, whereas in later episodes we get more of just like a smoke type demon that likes to shove itself down your throat. He gets on the plane, and as we see it up in the air, he asks how long they've been flying, and it's been about 40 minutes, and he likes to do his little demon joke, wow, time really does fly. But as it turns out, this plane does not, as he proceeds to open up the emergency exit and take the plane down, which that shouldn't cause a plane to crash, even if you depressurize like that. Like, they should have still been able to land, but that's irrelevant for our episode. Anyways.
I mean, Mythbusters proved you can't blow up a petrol can with a gunshot, but we still use that in video games.
You talking about like that video that I just showed you like 10 minutes ago, where I used the gun to ignite the gasoline?
You know, when I do see videos like that, I go back to that Mythbusters episode and I'm like, that's great. I don't think that could actually happen.
It was one of those, like, when I bought the can of gas in the game, I was like, how am I supposed to set this on fire? Like, I don't have any you know what? I can probably just shoot it on fire, even though I'm not supposed to be able to. And it turns out I could. After the plane crash, we get a scene of Dean getting a phone call from a Jerry Panowski. This was someone that Dean and his father had helped previously when he had an issue with a poltergeist. So he kind of knew that they dealt with stuff like this, and he was calling for help because he worked with the airport. Side note, this is one of a number of reoccurring actors in today's episode. Jerry Panowski was played by Brian Markinson, who we see later on in season 8 as he plays Stan Thompson in one of the episodes there. Jerry informs Sam and Dean of what happened with the plane, and as they're listening to the flight records, we get really our only instance of demons leaving EVP on recordings, as the demon lets them know that there's going to be no survivors, which is really all that is said, but they figure it out later. From here, Sam and Dean decide to pose as Homeland Security, and this is the first episode where we actually see them attempting to dress the part. It was surprising enough that it worked in the past, where they're like, oh, we're U.S. Marshals, but we're dressed in just street clothes. Now they went and got some suits, and they're actually trying to more accurately pose as these agents.
Got a costume wardrobe now.
Dean gets him some fake badges for Homeland Security, and we get a close-up view of Dean's badge a little bit later on in the episode. I didn't get a close-up one on Sam's, but Dean's alias on his badge for Homeland Security is a Jerry Wanick, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who was the production designer. No. And I can imagine why they would have cut out any close-ups of Sam's, as his alias was Robert Singer. Oh. Who, of course, was one of the executive producers, but also we get Bobby Singer later, yep. Who is also named after him, so they would have presumably cut that out. After getting their badges, there's a reference to Flight 401, which is an actual historic plane crash where they reused some of the parts from the crashed plane, and then there was reports of like the planes being haunted, and although the airlines refuted that, they discontinued the use of the reused parts. From here, Sam and Dean go to talk to one of the survivors of the crash, Max Jaffe. Max was played by Ket Turton, who we see later on in season 12 as he plays an Alton Moorhead in the 4th episode there. It'll be kind of interesting as we get up to these episodes, just kind of see the difference between what they look like then and now. as Sam and Dean are talking to Max, they still don't know what it is that they're dealing with. So they find out that there was a guy that essentially opened up the door and caused the plane to crash, but it's hinted at that, it wasn't a normal guy, which, first of all, it's not physically possible to open up these doors when the plane is pressurized. Mm-hmm. But, he basically kind of leads on that there's some sort of demonic activity going on or something.
Demon strength.
So Sam and Dean go to talk to Bonnie Phelps, who is played by Ingrid Tesh, who we see later on in season 14, episode 4, playing Barbara Blake. As they're talking to Bonnie, they find out that there wasn't anything special about the guy. He was just a normal guy. So it's seeming that he wasn't a monster, but now they're leaning more towards the demonic possession. This is where we get to see Sam and Dean use their suits to investigate the crash, as we see Dean busting out his homemade EMF meter. In their attempt to more accurately pose as these Homeland Securities, they almost get themselves caught as the real Homeland Security shows up, and they have to use their suits as assistance for their getaway to climb over the barbed wire on top of the fence. From here, we cut to one of the other survivors, Chuck Lambert. He was the pilot of the plane. Chuck Lambert was played by Daryl Shuttleworth, who we see later on in Season 5, Episode 5, as Sheriff Rick Carnegie. So, like I said, a lot of reused actors in this episode. While Sam and Dean were looking at the crash, they found a substance on the door handle of the door that was ripped off, and they get it analyzed to confirm the fact that it was sulfur that they found on the door handles. Now they're confirming to themselves that it's demonic possession.
Sulfur and demons, peanut butter and jelly, things that just go together.
As we go back to Chuck flying, same thing happens. He asks how long they've been up. It's been about 40 minutes. Time really does fly. This plane doesn't. Side note, that second part is not part of the line. That's just something I'm adding in. In our next scene, we get Sam and Dean find out that Chuck went flying again and his plane crashed. When Dean asks where the plane went down, he's told that it went down over by Nazareth, and he says, he's not going to point out the irony in that. When asked about it, he's like, oh, never mind. The relation to that here is the pilot was afraid of getting back to flying, and then when he did go flying, that killed him, so it could be referenced as, that being the hair of the dog that bit him. And Hair of the Dog is a song by the rock group Nazareth.
Oh.
So that's that connection right there on why Dean found that ironic that that's how it went.
It could also be that since they're dealing with a demon and having something crash outside of Nazareth, which is a biblical city.
So all of these coming together.
They all work.
That does make it fairly ironic. So it's at this point they realize that the demon's going after survivors, and the only one that's really remaining is Amanda Walker, one of the flight attendants from the flight.
Because the demon said no survivors, and he takes his job very seriously.
Yeah. It's important to stick to your work.
Yep.
In an attempt to prevent Amanda from going back to work, as this is her first night going on a plane since the crash, they attempt to get a hold of her at the airport as they call her up, and Dean poses as a Dr. James Hetfield, saying that her sister had been in a crash, and he's kind of found out as she had just gotten off the phone with her sister, and so that's not the case. Side note, James Hetfield was a frontman for Metallica, and so that's another example of Dean using his rock group aliases. It's at this point they kind of run out of options except trying to board the plane themselves and dealing with this in person, and we get the revelation from Dean that he's afraid of flying.
Ooh.
It's hinted at earlier that Dean's not afraid of anything. He's playing the tough guy, and now we get the reveal that no, there is something that he is afraid of, and it's planes. As they're on the plane, we see Dean being a little distraught by just basic turbulence and everything. Sam's telling him that he needs to calm down because demons go over those that are like mentally vulnerable, so if he's freaking out, he's basically wide open to being possessed himself. Mm-hmm. We get a flight attendant that comes in to check on Sam and Dean asks the flight attendant if she is Amanda, and she says no. Funny side note on this is that flight attendant was played by an actress named Amanda Wood. No relation.
No.
Dean decides to go in search of Amanda as they think that she might be the one that's possessed. And then Sam lets Dean know that, or reminds Dean that demons flinch at the name of God. And instructs Dean to say it in Latin, I guess to not be as super obvious, and says that in Latin it's Christo, which that is actually not the Latin name for God. There's debate on whether that is Italian or Portuguese, but not Latin. Anyways, Dean finds the flight attendant, makes an attempt, and finds out that she's not the one that's possessed. So they are running out of time to find out who it is that is possessed and try to take care of the problem. When Dean goes back to report into Sam, Sam lets Dean know that he found the Rituale Romanum, which is an exorcism that has two parts, where the first part expels the demon from the host and makes it stronger if it doesn't need a host to mess stuff up, and then the rest of it sends it back to hell. This is really the only episode that I can recall where they use this specific exorcism, probably because of the fact that it expels the demon and makes it stronger. They found better ones later on that doesn't have that side effect. They find out that the demon is possessing the co-pilot of the plane, and so they go back to the flight attendant and ask Amanda for help because they can't get into the cockpit. They need to deal with this. They get the co-pilot in the back and they start to perform the exorcism, and this is also, they're still kind of trying to figure out what they want to have work and not work with demons. So we actually see holy water like physically burning the flesh of the vessel, essentially.
Yep.
Whereas later on it doesn't really harm the person, it just hurts the demon.
A little bit of smoke, and then that's about it.
Yeah. The demon proceeds to taunt Sam with info on Jessica as he's performing the exorcism, which is going to have some effect on Sam later on, as he's obviously distraught by this. As they get the first part of the exorcism complete, the demon exits the co-pilot, and here we actually see it exiting through the mouth instead of through the eyes as we saw it entering, both when the gentleman at the beginning and when the co-pilot were possessed. They finish the exorcism, they save the day, and then towards the end of the episode, we kind of get the idea of, well, hey, Jerry, how'd you even know to call us? And it's revealed that John has set up his voicemail on his phone that had been disconnected for a while to basically just say, hey, if you need help, call Dean and he can help you out. Because John's still up to something, so he's busy and doesn't have time for this.
He's on a hunting trip.
Yeah.
A very long one.
And that's where we are left off with our episode. So we get our first look at demons here. It changes the way it's presented throughout later episodes, but how close did they come in this first episode with their representation?
Yes. Demons are going to be a little bit like zombies,
Okay.
in which that we have so many representations of what a demon is throughout all cultures and all history that it's really hard to miss the mark when it comes to demons. So, but they do focus a little bit more on Christian demons, which does kind of narrow the gap a little bit in terms of knowledge.
Mm.
One of the things that I found the most interesting when we were looking at demons and the mythology of demons within supernatural is how they decided to approach it, as them being like clouds, or them being like smoke or dust that enters a person or to possess them. Because there's been a lot of debate, like scholarly debate amongst theologians about whether a demon is an actual corporeal thing and actually has a body, or if it is incorporeal, like ghosts, and merely exists to, possess.
Okay there, Professor.
Yeah.
It's a throwback to the Wendigo episode.
Nope.
I know as we're hunting something and it's corporeal.
Corporeal.
Also,
Professor.
a red sun rises. Blood has been spilled this night.
Yeah, I also think of
It's just a circle of life.
Fire.
Anyways,
a lot of us know what a corporeal demon looks like. It's got the horns. It looks like a satyr. It's got the bottom half of a goat, generally red, pitchforks, all of that. And then we've seen them kind of displayed in a lot of different ways. If you look at like the TV show Lucifer, where it's a very, he's essentially as the devil, a fallen angel, but then as you're looking at these demons, they look relatively human that then can become monstrous.
Okay.
Supernatural went the route of incorporeal, and what's really interesting is that Saint Basil the Great actually went through and was describing what a demon could be, and he theorized what a demon could do is that a demon could actually condense themselves into like a smoke or a mist, and that would allow them to enter a person's body in order to be able to take possession of them. But also what they could do is they could actually condense their body into, like if they used enough water vapor, or if they used enough mist, or used enough smoke, they could actually create their own body. Witches during a lot of the Inquisition, under the duress of torture obviously, would actually say that while they were like copulating with demons had a very cold body that would come on top of them. And so Basil the Great decided that I'm going to rephrase that. All right.
Sorry, I'm 12.
Which is something I thought was really neat for Supernatural to kind of incorporate that instead of making it like a ghost, which is like this person that kind of flashes back and forth. You have something that is otherworldly that is able to enter your body and then take control of you.
Right.
I can see the smirk happening.
I just keep going back to it.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the Rituale Romanum, there's a couple of episodes that I'm actually wanting to look at exorcisms and demons more in depth, because this is really our first look at what a demon does.
Right.
And this is really one of the only examples in the show of a demon just doing chaotic things to be chaotic. Most of the time they have like when we see demons, they're trying to go after the Winchesters, or they've got like this bigger plan.
They have some sort of an agenda.
They have an agenda. This demon that we encounter is just like natural demon out in the wilderness, just out to cause chaos. We don't know why the demon's here. We don't know what its agenda is. We just know that this demon is trying to cause as much chaos, death, and destruction as it possibly can. And it like a serial killer having a modus operandi, it's just using planes.
We find out later that demons are just like damned souls that just end up becoming demons over time.
Yep.
Maybe this demon used to be one of the Wright brothers. I don't like your designs on airplanes.
I don't like this. I'm taking it with me. I mean, that's the thing, too, is that we do later find out that there is a very human element behind demons. The way they're kind of presented is that they are very otherworldly, and their motivations are otherworldly, so we don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we later find out that these are just damned human souls, it adds a human element as to why is this happening the way that it is. But there are other episodes that I want to get to when we actually look at demons and exorcisms. But one I did want to point out is that the the way that Supernatural often presents exorcisms is they have like their one go-to exorcism. There are hundreds of exorcisms. There were hundreds of books written on exorcisms. There were Italian exorcisms that had been later translated into English. There were the very popular ones, like the one that we had in this episode, are all done in Latin, which comes to the Rituale Romanum. But the Rituale Romanum isn't specifically an exorcism. It's a book of exorcisms collected by the Catholic Church that are to be used during an exorcism. When we get to Bobby Singer's episode, we'll break down exorcism a little bit more in depth. But yeah, looking at demons, especially since we're looking at the Christian demon, there's a lot of different demons throughout culture. This was going to be a pretty good start to the mythology built into the world.
Well, we got plenty of time to build on that.
And they're going to build on it. And I believe the next episode, though, we're going to be going into another bit of continuing supernatural mythology, which is we get to see another ghost in action in the next episode.
I always find it interesting, like, one of the things, which again, it's TV, whatever.
Yeah.
They show this demon having the strength to rip open a door on an airplane, which has like tons of pressure on it or whatever, and then they have a fist fight with it and they're winning. And it's like, what? Why doesn't he just rip their airplane door open, figuratively speaking?
Yeah. It could be like the difference between, like, he needs to almost like store some of that energy up in order to be able to do it.
It could be, but this is a reoccurring thing. Like when we later get introduced to vampires, they're supposed to be really strong, and they are often outmatched by Sam and Dean in a fight.
Or it could be kind of like the difference between like fighting a power lifter versus like a mixed martial artist or like a heavyweight fighter.
There is an aspect to that, but there's often time where they get into like a tug of war of sorts.
Oh yeah.
Where like there's a weapon and they're like fighting over it, and in that instance, then they shouldn't be doing as well.
Yeah. Well, in that case, we call that plot armor.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking at the Bloody Mary episode next time, which is my least favorite episode.
I thought you were really looking forward to this one.
I do not like that episode. It's actually wonderful from like a storytelling perspective and a retelling of the urban legend. But if I had to pick one that literally did scare me, that one. I hate watching that episode. I hate rewatching that episode. Yeah, this should be fun for me.
Looking forward to it. Well, until next time, be safe, buckle up, and we got work to do.